sometimes you have to take a little bit of extra stress and put in a little bit extra work short term so that it frees you up to have some of those things that you want in the long term. And one of the main things is, just flexibility and time. I put myself into overdrive for those, 3 to 5 years where it was pretty stressful to do everything on top of my business. But I traded those 3 to 5 years for the rest of my life. That was the trade. Like, I had to go into overdrive for a couple of years, but now I get to do whatever I want all the time. And
Welcome to the Mindfulness Dream podcast, where we help you to not decide what's really important whilst chasing your dreams. Today's guest is Ayodeji Awosika. He's the author of multiple books, including The Destiny Formula and You 2.0. He's been featured in Business Insider, the Huffington Post, and Thrive Global. He's collected over 80,000 followers on Medium at the same time, and this is all after being a college dropout who, at 24, was broke and had no idea what he was doing with his life. So he turned everything around and now he lives the life that he loves on his own terms. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Welcome to Mindfulness Driven, Ayo. It's a pleasure to finally have a chat with you. I think I've been reading your work for 3 years now. So before I even decided to become a writer, I was reading you, and you're one of the first people that I remember reading on Medium, because you've got a name that stands out. And we were just talking about this just before we started recording, is how sometimes people think, oh, there's nobody like me, so then I can't be successful. Whereas we're both examples of somebody who's got a name that maybe isn't so memorable or so easy to pronounce, but people have followed us because of our ideas. So glad to have you here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here. I've kept an eye on your stuff the past couple of years, so it's nice to formally meet. And like you said, my philosophy tends to be that good ideas, the cream will eventually rise to the top, regardless of where you come from, what your name is, what you look like. So never worry about any of that stuff and just put your best work out there, and good things tend to happen in the long run, for sure.
I think so much of your content is based around kind of challenging people's perceptions, right? And breaking some of the negative mental models that people have. Is there any common advice you hear from other people that you really disagree with, and then you think that it leads people down the wrong path?
One of the number one things that I hear that I totally disagree with is like this idea that, just don't worry, things will eventually work out on their own, just stick around and things will be fine. Like, that is 100% not true at all. Things do not often get better eventually. Things can often, if they're untended to, things can actually get a lot worse. There are things that you should be cognizant of in your life. If things aren't going well, that should be a point of worry. There should be a level of concern. And I do think this idea, kind of this trend in our society where we kind of like treat everyone with kid gloves and tell them these fantasy stories and tell them if they just follow this societal rule book, everything will be okay. Like, it's 100% not true. And people tend to experience that later on in life. So, there are consequences to your decisions, right? The central themes in what I talk about is taking off your rose-colored glasses. You have to learn how to be objective about yourself, your role and responsibility, and the outcomes you're getting in your life, and what variables you need to change different outcomes. Because I guarantee you, if you're not getting the results you want and you just leave things to their own devices, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to like where that direction trends. So don't buy the advice that eventually everything will just work it out somehow magically. It's like, no, you can go and waste decades, years of your life and look up thinking what the heck happened if you're not cognizant in the present moment.
It stresses the signal, right? If you're getting stressed out about something, that's a signal to make a change. Like, you can't just let it keep things the way they are if that's led you down a path where you're unhappy or burnt out. So it's a signal, right? Like, you've got to use that and act on it. If you don't use that body's natural response, your body is telling you, oh, like, something is wrong here. Like, you shouldn't be in the situation you're in. You've got to work out some way of dealing with that. And for example, I see a lot of people who are burning out. They're working like 100 hours a week or whatever, or more than that. And they think, oh, eventually it's going to get lesser. And eventually things are going to be okay. And I think I've seen a meme recently where they said being an adult is every week saying, oh, next week is going to be quieter. And that happens just until you die. Because you can't just wait for things to sort themselves out. You've got to do something about it. Obviously, I know in your past, you did do something about it, right? Like, you switched your careers, you went through different traumas. Can you talk a bit about that? Like, what happened to you to lead you down the path that you are going now?
Growing up, people always would say things like, they'd say, like, you're a smart kid. I say to be going places, you have all this potential, blah, blah, blah. So I kind of told myself that story that, I'm a smart kid, things are going to work out at potential, blah, blah, blah. Things will be okay, right? And then in my younger years, I fell into a lot a lot of the traps young people fall into. You fell very deep, doing, lots of drinking, lots of partying, doing lots of drugs. I was selling drugs. I had gotten in trouble. I had gotten in trouble with the law. I had been arrested. I was on felony probation for 5 years. I dropped out of college. I was working in factory jobs for $10 an hour, 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, no degree, convicted felon, no money. Just looked up and, I had looked around and seen a lot of my other friends, they were doing well. They got out of school, they were getting their jobs, they were happy. And like me, I was look up, I was 24, 25 years old and I had nothing to show for it. And there was, there was no more of this idea. Like, when you're 18, everyone looks at you and they say, "Oh, you have so much potential, young man. You're going places." But the older you get, the less you're going places, and the more like you're in those places now. You're in a certain place, right? So I looked at that and I was just like, I looked at what I saw and I looked at myself. I realized, even though my life wasn't at the point where I wanted to be, I was like, dude, you're way too smart for this. You do have too much potential, but you can't just like sit on your hands and do nothing about it. So in the beginning, I didn't know what I was gonna do, but I was like, yeah, like this isn't working. Like I can no longer do this, right? So then I went down the path that a lot of people go on, found myself on YouTube, just watching videos. How do I make my life better? Started reading books, different things like that. Started getting real personal development. And for a while, it was just me like, trying to fix my mindset, trying to improve the quality of my life. I went from some in that process, I went from some like very menial jobs to eventually like getting better employment, getting myself in shape, getting myself smarter, getting myself kind of right physically, emotionally, spiritually, things like that. Fast forward like a year later, a friend of mine had been reading. I've been putting like these little social media posts on my website, and it was just kind of like things I was learning, and they were kind of these like long, rambling, kind of detailed, like almost like essays, so to speak, right? And so I had a buddy of mine who must have noticed that I kind of had a talent for writing. And he said, "Hey, man, I'm starting this website, this blog, and I think you should write articles on it. I think you'd be good at it." And I'm like, "Sure. Like, what kind of articles can I write?" He's like, "You can write whatever you want." So I wrote an article the next day. He posted it on Facebook, and I think it got like a couple dozen likes on the Facebook page. And for me, I was like, "Oh, like damn!" It's like, "Oh, okay." Like somebody wants to read this. Like, "Oh, maybe I'll just write another one." I wrote another one, and I wrote another one. Started finding different websites to write on, and yeah, pretty much since that day where he first asked me to write an article, I've been writing pretty much daily for the past 7 years, and I literally never stopped since that point.
Going back to that, like that moment where you decided to change, what was it? Was it like just that kind of accumulation of this feeling of you were wasting your potential, or was there like a particular like epiphany moment? Because I think it's a mistake which some people make, is that they think there needs to be an epiphany moment. They think there needs to be something really bad happens that you have to hit absolute rock bottom before you can change. Whereas if you're on that slide or you feel like you're going downhill, at any time you can try and get out of it. You don't need to keep waiting until like one particular moment.
I think for me it was just like an accumulation of frustration started to build up. Even when I wasn't doing things right, I always had like a pretty high level of self-awareness. And this day after day, like what I would do is I let that frustration build up until like things just hit a breaking point, right? And I remember I was literally like in my room, I like stood up and yelled out loud, like literally, I'm like, I'm not fucking living like this like anymore. Like I yelled it, right? So it's just like there was like one day where I was like, wow, this is all too much. But yeah, it's just a matter of like honoring your frustration and anxiety. Like those things, like you said, those things are there for a reason. And I think what we get into now in this new culture that I have a problem with is this idea that like automatically you're automatically supposed to like dull the pain. Like if you feel bad or anxious, you should try to dull it or ignore it, or that your default state is that you're supposed to be happy. Like I feel like one problem with a lot of people is they're overly preoccupied with their own happiness to the point where they don't change anything, right? It's like, sometimes people walk around and they'll be like, "Oh man, I just don't know what it is. I feel anxious all the time. I feel down. I feel this." Of course there are genuine There are genuine medical conditions some people have, and it's above my pay grade to talk about that. But in some instances, it's like, look at your life. Like, you hate your job, you're out of shape, you find no passion and purpose in anything that you're doing. Your relationships are struggling. Like, in those conditions, why would you be happy? Like, it should, for some people, the answers to why you're not happy are very obvious. Like, you should just look up and look around and see which some of those knobs are turned the wrong way, dude. You're not, for a lot of people, your unhappiness is not some grand mystery. You know what you're doing wrong, and you know what you need to be doing. It's just, instead of like trying to push that down, which is what a lot of people try to do, they try to distract themselves from it, or they try to dull it in whatever sense or fashion works for them. But it's actually like let the pain, like, it's better to feel a lot more pain up front and just rip the Band-Aid at a certain point than to continue to have like tolerable doses of pain. And that's what people do. They don't want to confront the pain of when you're really trying to pivot your life is a lot to bear, but it's you take it up front. You take your lumps up front, you overcome your hurdles up front, and then it can be more smooth sailing. To whereas most people, they don't like the life they're living, but it doesn't hurt. It hurts just enough for them to wake up. Like, their job sucks, but it's just okay enough for them to get up and go the next day, right? Their life isn't great, but they have enough things going where, like, they'll tolerate it continuing to happen. And then next thing you know, years, decades blink by. And then it hits them. So for me, I was trying to like accumulate that feeling of regret that I've had 50 years down the road. And I tried to like emotionally cause that to happen when I was 25. So I kind of piled all that up, and I thought about, one thing that really helped is like, I looked at some of the people who were years and decades ahead of me. I did use them as models for people I did not want to be like. I'm going to be 100% honest. I looked at them and said, yeah, I don't want to end up like this. So I just extrapolated my current actions into the future, and I really, really, really didn't like what I saw. So that was the catalyst for me to change, for sure.
Going back to one of your points there, and I think it's an eternal conflict for me with the idea of mindfulness and making sure that it's not something which you should just dull and pretend that you don't feel a certain way you do. Because this is one of the things that happen at the moment when people say, oh, use this technique, like breathing technique, or use yoga or something like that to make yourself feel better. And like, that's good in like managing it, and you should do that in different ways. But there's no point in if like you're working in a job you hate, then doing yoga and breathing exercises, well, like you said, it's smoothing over the cracks a little bit. It's going to help you, but the real solution is to change the job or to change your scenario. You can't just stay in a scenario you don't like and try to use management techniques. Sometimes, like you said, you've got to do the bigger action and take a different path. And it's one of the things which I kind of have this conflict with myself and in the advice I give, to make sure that I don't give that kind of impression that the ideas you can follow, these are just going to like solve all your problems. Whereas like, actually, you do need to think about like, am I doing the thing that I love? And if you're not, then try and find it, like experiment. I always say that to people, experiment. Like, you don't necessarily need to know what's going to be the right thing, but try different things out, because that's the only way you're going to find out.
Yeah. 100%. And like you, like one thing that was key for me in the beginning is like, I did pick up a meditation practice around that time when I was trying to change my life, and it did help. But meditation, mindfulness, like, those are means to an end, right? Where I think what a lot of people do with whether it's mindfulness and productivity and techniques, they try to make those an end themselves. Like, they try to form a personality around mindfulness. It's like, no, you just use that to be more mindful of what you're doing. Like, that's the point. Mindfulness isn't so you can go lock yourself away in a room and meditate your whole life. It's a tool to help you be more productive and actually be more successful in the worldly realm, right? And that's another thing that I push back on people on quite a bit. I've noticed a lot of people, they're like these mindfulness practitioners and self-care practitioners, and like their whole philosophy is that like, you could just meditate things away, like, goals and desires are rooted in your ego and you should abandon them. And like, Stoicism teaches you how to like blunt your emotions to zero. And I don't believe those. I don't believe that in that philosophy. I believe that there is a spiritual element to conquering things in the worldly realm. I think there is a part of your mind and soul and spirit that you cannot access unless you push yourself through challenges in the worldly realm. So It might not, it's not necessarily about making the money, but it's about the type of person you had to become to build that business. It's not necessarily about getting anything you want, all the fancy toys and things like that, but it is having those things in your mind and scratching that itch to see first.
It's exactly what the name of the podcast is, right? Mindful and driven. It's this idea that you can have the ambitions, like they're not mutually exclusive, right? You can take the time to rest and recover and then go hard again. And it's that balance, isn't it? Where sometimes people think you have to be either or. If you choose to meditate, if you choose to take care of yourself, if you choose to read, you have to then shun trying to reach your goals and trying to meet your targets. And that's not the case, right? It's a tool to help you. Like what we do now, right, is people don't sometimes see the side of it. It's like you do have the failures and it can be hard. And that's where these different techniques come into play to help us bounce back. And then we go again and we try something new again. And it's that resilience, which I think really helps me from like the mindfulness I do, is to build that resilience and that also knowing my own limits. Where am I pushing myself too hard where it's not sustainable? Because that's what I really want at the end of the day, right? Is like sustainable success, where I've got the time in my day to do the things I want to do. And you talked about productivity as well there. I don't want to be more productive just so I can make more and more. Like at the end of the day, what's the point of that? It's for me is that I'm being more productive so I can get the stuff I want done in time. So I've got more time for spontaneity.
Yeah, like one of my favorite videos was from a guy named Ty Lopez, and one of the things he says, he was like, optimizing your life for entrepreneurship is stupid. Like you don't want to spend 100% of your time working, right? It's just one of many different components. And it's like, people need to figure out where they are in the spectrum, right? So for some people, if you're working too hard and you're working on the wrong thing, yeah, maybe pump the brakes and work on something different. But what a lot of people do is like, a lot of people right now, they fall into the camp of like, they're not working hard enough. They're either not working hard enough or they're working on the wrong thing, right? So they're working really hard. You know, it's kind of that analogy, like they're building a really tall ladder, but it's leaning against the wrong wall, right? So a lot of people do that. Or a lot of people, they just need to spend a little bit more time. But for me, I kind of look at my idea of self-care is taking care of yourself, right? So for me, self-care for me looks like going to the gym when I don't really feel like going, but then after I go, I feel great afterwards. Self-care for me might mean when I was at my job that I didn't like, spending some time outside of my job that, you know, was working before I went to work, during my lunch breaks, after work. Did that create an additional level of stress? Yes, but it was towards a good end. So that was self-care. I was taking care of my future self, right?
Hi everyone. I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. I want to take a quick break to ask you to check in on yourself. There's many people struggling with balance, and there's nothing to be ashamed about. The tips that my guests and I share can hopefully help you along the way. But if you already feel overwhelmed or burnt out, it's probably best that you ask somebody for help too. For some, this might be a friend or family member, but others might feel like they have nobody they can talk to. If you're one of these people, check out the link in the show notes. It's for United for Global Mental Health. They've got helplines all across the world with people willing to listen on the other side. It's important to let somebody know how you're feeling. Now, back to the show. One of the interesting things I think I've learned about burnout over time as well is that if you're doing something which doesn't motivate you, which you don't enjoy, then accelerates burnout. You might be working the same, let's say you're working 8 hours a day, right? You're working 8 hours on something which you hate, you don't believe in the mission, you're looking at yourself like, I'm not adding any value, like I don't get any satisfaction from what I'm doing. You might burn out quicker than somebody who's working 12-hour days, but they absolutely love what they're doing. It's the whole thing about managing your energy rather than your time, right? It's like a lot of people think like, what hours do I have in the day? Whereas you going to the gym, right? You said it's hard at the beginning, but then you feel amazing afterwards, and that probably makes you way more productive in the afternoon. Whereas somebody who is just looking at their time, we're like, oh, what? That's an hour that I could be spending working instead. But that's not the same effect because it changes how your time is measured in a way, right? Because that hour makes you feel so good about yourself, gives you all that energy, and then you kill the rest of the stuff that you're doing in the day instead.
100%. There are so many things I think about in terms of managing my energy and getting the best of both worlds, like exercise, and not just, like you said, not just routine exercise. Like, so sometimes I'll go to the gym and I'll do the lifting weights, which me personally, I actually like that stuff. So that's not hard for me either. But, you know, sometimes it might mean like, instead of just lifting weights, maybe I'll go for a walk or like go on a walk with a friend and like we'll talk and catch up. Or maybe I'll go hang out with my buddies and we'll go shoot some hoops or something. Or like we'll go get a soccer game going, right? I'm cognizant of the things that I put in my body. Like I realize that I don't think a lot of people realize the connection between their nutrition and their mental health. Not only what you eat, but when you eat it, the time intervals. Like I keep all that stuff into account. And yeah, it's just about integrating everything together and like not doing too much of one thing and incorporating all those areas of your life. So yeah, you definitely want to be cognitive. Like people like that. That's the thing that happens to people that, like you said, that drains away that passion. It's not just that they're not going to. It's not just that they're going to that job that they kind of don't like. They stopped going to play intramural soccer with their buddies. They stopped playing their guitar. They stopped painting. They stopped doing the little volunteer stuff they used to do, right? So it's like as adults get older, they get way too serious. That's one thing that I've noticed about people too. It's kind of counterintuitive, right? Because people like us, we kind of go out on a limb in projects that might not make us money right away, but that's almost like we get the benefit of maybe making money down the road because we're taking it less serious. Where someone who's just working, like got to get that dollar, their lives are all oriented around money 100%. And then as a consequence, they might end up even making less money than they would have had they tried something that was a little bit more creative, right? So yeah, it all comes together, managing your energy. And yeah, what are we here for? Like we're not here to work and be drones. Like you get one spin on planet Earth. If your life is defined by going to work every day, that is something that I think you would do well reevaluating for sure.
What kind of scares me is some of the people I know is that they sacrifice the things that they love for a job they don't love. And it's like, wait, how does that make sense? And I've done it in the past myself when I was younger, is that like I stopped doing martial arts. I stopped doing these things because I had to fit it around my job. When you think about it, like in hindsight, it's like, wait, so I stopped doing these things that I really enjoyed to kind of climb the corporate ladder. But wait, is that why I'm alive? Is that what I'm here for? I think since I've started doing I'm back to dance and doing time with my friends and things like that, it affects who I am as a person. It makes me more like enthusiastic when I'm in conversations. And then that leads to more opportunities because I've got things to talk about that aren't just work. And I think sometimes people go down that alley of being so focused on being successful that they lose the bits about them that make them unique, which is what will really make them achieve what they want to achieve later on in life. And like looking at your own schedule now, you said that you're able to do what you want when you want. What is the like lifestyle you built for yourself? What's your like daily routine or weekly routine look like?
Usually I wake up, no alarm. Like whenever I wake up, get ready, like drink my coffee, do a little meditation. Then I go out the door, and then I hit the coffee shop, and then I usually like working at coffee shops because it's like nice vibes. Sometimes you get to talk to people, meet people and stuff. So that's cool. I usually just work there, usually about like 4 to 5 hours, 4 to 6 hours. The first 4 hours, I'm like in a pretty like heavy creative block. So that might be writing or like working on something product related. And then like the next hour or two, like that's just kind of managerial stuff. And yeah, after that, I eat a lunch. I do like intermittent fasting. So I usually eat a late lunch, like probably like around 1 or 2. Whatever happens after that, I usually hit a workout after that. And then after that, yeah, it's usually just like hanging out with people I care about. And that's just pretty much it. I don't work excessively hard.
That sounds great. That sounds like something I should be doing myself. Because what I found is that I have shiny object syndrome. So I tend to start new things and I really enjoy doing them. And how have you managed that? Because obviously like you're like me in many ways. You've got the writing, but you also enjoy doing video and podcasting. How do you keep those all from trying to get too ambitious in a way and trying to do too much for each of them?
Yeah, usually like my rule of thumb is like for the most part, you really only want to have like a primary thing that you work on and a secondary thing you work on. Usually like if you take on more than that, it's going to be a challenge for you. So for a while, like I was writing, I was doing YouTube videos. I got away with doing the podcast as a third thing because I had 4 other co-hosts, so I wasn't doing everything. Like I wasn't doing all the audio mixing and stuff like that. So I didn't need to dedicate 100% of my effort to it. But yeah, you just have a primary thing you work on and a secondary thing you work on, and that's pretty much the most you can handle. And then a good way to like focus on keeping your long-term projects together and like figuring out what you want to work on. Usually like 90-day windows are really good for assessing different projects. So you can say like, all right, so for the next 90 days, like this is where I want to be number 1 and number 2. And then really see that out, and then like 90 days from then, like review everything that you had thought in terms of like the amount of time you wanted to work on stuff, like some of the goals you had, and then like measure it kind of like quarterly. Like I feel like quarterly basis is a really good way to track your life and like sit back, and it's like long enough where you can have some progress done, but not so long that you have to like overcommit to stuff. So yeah, usually about every 90 days, I'll check on what my like kind of 1A and 1B is. And if things are going well that way, that I stick with it. But if I need to recalibrate and pivot, then I'll do that.
In the future, is there anything which like you want to make your number one or number two that you want to test out?
So one of the things that is might be a pivot for me is actually working on creating products to the back end part of my business, and for once making writing the number two thing that I do, right? So one thing that I've never done that I've seen a lot of other writers do is actually pump the brakes on writing so much so that they actually can work on other stuff and launch it. And that's something that I've never really put like product creation above my writing. And that's actually something that I think I'm going to be leaning towards doing here in Q1.
Have you got any ideas of what that's going to be?
So right now I'm working on, it's like the development of a mentorship program. So like I want to work with a group of students and try to help them figure out what they want to do, and help them move forward in kind of like a 90-day window to help themselves personally or professionally. So whether that's trying to help them switch careers, like trying to get a side business off the ground, or just like in general, trying to improve their lives. My next idea is like kind of this 90-day mentorship program where I'm going to work with a group of students, walk them through everything I know about personal development, and really try to give them some real head steam and breakthrough and some momentum towards some of their longer term goals. So that's a new program that I'm working on right now. And then I'm also going to begin writing my fourth book this week. So those two things are my primary focuses right now. So yeah, my normal writing routine is actually going to take a back seat for once. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. And I think it happened to me as well last year is that I haven't been writing for anywhere near as long as you have. But it kind of took the back seat because there's now 2 podcasts, and it's kind of, I needed to create those systems and really put the time and effort into it. But now going forward this year, I've got a lot of episodes recorded. It's all going to be much more relaxed and the system is there, and I can then refocus back on other things again as well. I really like the idea of the 90-day membership program you've got going, because I think as well, many people think you can just buy something and you buy it off the shelf and you will learn it yourself. But I think often it's having that person there to bounce the ideas off of. It's just so valuable. And I think even myself, most of the stuff I've learned, like I've read so many books, whatever, but it's from talking to people like you and talking to people that I've met through the podcast, for example, where there's ideas really solidify and I can really understand how I can act on what I'm thinking. And I know there's many people like me who read a million self-help books, but still fall into the same bad habits. And I think that's where working with somebody can really help. Did you have that yourself? Did you have somebody who you worked with when you were trying to come out of the place you got yourself into your like mid-20s? Or was it all kind of self-taught?
I definitely had a series of people I learned from and mentors, both like formal and informal, that have helped me throughout my life. And I think that's huge. So I did involve myself in like a self-improvement course / mentorship program. And that was really helpful for me. When I first started writing, I started submitting articles to this website called Thought Catalog. And one of the editors took like a personal liking to me and worked with me directly and edited and gave me feedback on all my articles for like 18 months. Like that was huge. Having like a seasoned industry veteran, like right there, like literally tutoring and mentoring me. So that was one that I kind of lucked into, but that was still the progress of like putting myself out there and just seeing what happened. And, somebody responded well to it. When it came to learning some of the things like more advanced, when it came to writing, I've taken several writing courses. I've taken book publishing courses. I've taken courses on elements of growing your writing business. I've had several business coaches. I have a business coach right now. And every single time I've invested money in my own education, I have gotten a massive ROI from it, like a massive, massive, massive ROI. So I think some people might be hesitant about, investing into like mentorship or coaching or learning certain skills online. And for me, the way I looked at it is that I know that I can go out there and get free information online, but I knew that paying for it would just speed up the process, because somebody who already knew what they were doing and had it all laid out would tell you which order to do things and how to do them in the right way, instead of you having like to just guess with everything. So every time I've hired a coach or taken a program, it's helped me learn a skill faster than I would have on my own. And I've always profited from them. So yeah, I've pretty much this whole time, I've always had some form of either informal or formal mentorship and coaching. So I'm 100% a believer in that.
What's one mindset shift you think people listening today should make in their lives that could make a positive difference?
One thing, honestly, I think would be the idea of, putting your trust in someone else to help you if you're looking for guidance. And a lot of the time it's like, hey, you've been trying to figure it out on your own, and how well has that been working for you, right? So whether that's seeking, in the beginning, I sought mentorship in the form of books and just learning about different things like that, right? And there was just something about even if that the tiniest bit of financial investment into your education, whether that includes books or something else, I think is a real huge mental shift, because it makes things a little bit more serious for you. You feel some level of investment. And, I look at it and I'm like, it's crazy. I've paid $500 for a writing course where the ROI on it is quite literally 100x, 1000x, whatever, right? And some people will look at those and they'll be skeptical, but I'm like, hey, you gotta reorient your mind. You didn't bat an eye when you paid $50,000 to go to university, but now you're skeptical of this $500 course. It's I actually would think I've never had an experience. I haven't had an experience personally where I've been burned or scammed by anyone online, period. So I think a lot of people could maybe lower their skepticism, and investing into your own education with your actual money, I think is something that does help shift your mindset.
And if anybody's listening now and wants to do something like that, obviously I can vouch for various people. So just feel free to message me and say, look, this is my problem. Who do you recommend? And there's plenty of people that I know, like Ayo, who've got this experience of helping people get through different issues that they've had. And I guess on that note, where can people hear more from you who are listening and they aren't familiar with your work already?
Yeah, so they can go to ayotheauthor.com. That's my main website. And go on there, check that stuff out. There's some areas where you can sign up and get some free stuff if you want to be on the list. So go to Ayo, AYO is the way it's spelled, theauthor.com. And then you can find stuff. All my books are there. All my content's there. Get some free goodies, all that jazz. So that's where you can find me.
Perfect. And it's been a pleasure chatting with you today. So the final question I ask all my guests is, what's one small thing that's brought you joy recently?
Getting back to being creative. It's been interesting. Now I've had a certain point in my life where, I've made a decent amount of money. I got things going together, and it now starting new projects and getting those ideas rumbling and kind of feeling like a beginner again. That's been pretty fun. So I'm enjoying that right now.
If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, I'd love it if you could leave me a 5-star review. It really helps get the message out further. Wherever you're listening, it would be awesome if you could subscribe and to share on your social media channels. If you want to see more of my work and advice, you can find all of the links in the show notes. Thank you again for listening, and I hope you have a lovely day.